lost a lot of things. I lost marriages, I lost husbands, I lost the ability to have children. I choose to try to keep it up on the shiny, happy people side, because if you are miserable while you have cancer, then you have no friends.
I'm dying.
I constantly remind her, you've come this far. If you weren't going to be able to do it, you wouldn't be here.
If you give your body a chance to heal, it will.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. As toxins become a more common threat in our world today, the issue of protecting our immune system is a prevailing area of concern. At 20 years old, Kelly Gallagher found herself trying every treatment possible to build up her immune system in order to fight off deadly cancers. Using a combination of both traditional medicine and holistic remedies, Kelly never gave up. It was a battle worth fighting, and one that offers valuable lessons.
Nobody I knew that was young had cancer. You know, other people had cancer. Old people had cancer. It definitely took the chunk of my life where I thought I would be working my way up the NBC ladder. I wanted to be in programming, and I wanted to be a showrunner. I wanted to be doing sitcoms. You know, that's really what I wanted to do. And having cancer, it put a semi-label on me. You know, when people think you have cancer, they think you can't possibly do anything else. I just worked my life around my creativity and trying to do something in Hollywood. I was thinking about writing TV shows. I was thinking about, you know, auditions. I was working as an actor, and I didn't think that much about cancer. I thought about health.
Kelly Gallagher was an all-American girl. She grew up in Florida, an extreme athlete. Swimming was her special passion. She'd be in the water 4 to 5 hours almost every day. She also loved music and Hollywood and embraced all the adventure that life had to offer.
I had a great boyfriend. You know, I grew up snorkeling and spearfishing and water skiing. Eventually I learned to surf. You know, I grew up in a small town. Of course, when we were kids, we thought that we had been banished to, you know, the far side of the moon. 8 houses from the beach. You know, I go back today and I go, what was I thinking? You know, it was a great life.
Kelly is dynamic in the truest sense of the word. Because dynamics in music are when you have extreme lows and extreme highs. And Kelly's life and Kelly have had such extreme lows and extreme highs. Dynamics in the truest sense of the word.
I was always kind of more of a writer, but I thought when you went to school that you had to go off and do something that you didn't like and get paid for it, and that's what a job meant. So, you know, here I go marching off to the University of Florida, and I'm barely 17. School was tough. My friends were having fun in their different classes, and, you know, TV, journalism, and broadcasting, and all this stuff, and I was like, I'm in Calc 4 with physics. I was modeling part-time to make extra money, and so I modeled for like Gotcha and different, you know, surfwear kind of things. So I was in my 3rd year of engineering school, and, you know, I thought I was pretty, you know, normal, collegiate, tired kid. I went away for Christmas to see my cousins, and my cousin Eileen had just graduated from nursing school, and she took one look at my neck, and the color kind of drained a little bit from her, and she said to me to tell my mother what was, you know, about this lump on my neck. She said, well, I want you to go to the doctor, and, you know, I babysat for all the doctors in town, so it wasn't like this huge, I want you to go to the doctor. It was like, go see Dr. Tyler. So the next day, I went into the doctor's office, and he took one look at me, and they didn't even let me go home. They put me right in the hospital. I didn't even have a vocabulary for this. I'm 20, you know? All I can think about at the time is that I'm supposed to be going skiing, and now I'm in the hospital and having my neck biopsied.
Not knowing what else to do while waiting for the results of her biopsy, Kelly went back to college, burying herself in her difficult studies, modeling, and her active social life. But 2 weeks later, the test results were sent home to her mother.
My mother was notorious for always calling all my friends trying to find me. You know, this is before cell phones and pagers, so, you know, she would, if I didn't call home, she would be calling everywhere, and she got a hold of one of my friends, and she had to tell me what my mom told her. And my mom had told her that I had to come home, that I had cancer. I had Hodgkin's disease, is what they said, and Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I was in stage 2A.
We break down lymphomas into two large groups, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Hodgkin's lymphoma. They are both diseases of the lymphatic system, which is part of your immune system. There are malignancies where there's an overgrowth of some of the lymphocytes that become a malignant lymphocyte. Those lymphocytes, as they grow, involve multiple lymph node areas, begin to swell, and can cause lots of symptoms, including night sweats, weight loss, pain. Eventually, untreated, the disease will continue to grow into the lung, into some of the other organs, and you can die from this.
I didn't really think much about it, but when they biopsied it, it was like the size of an egg. You know, at that time, there was just no real way to process this information. You know, it was the 80s, we were in Gainesville, and it came as quite a shock, because I was going to have to, you know, leave school. And as much as I really didn't like engineering, you know, I still was living in my sorority house. I had a life there, and, you know, I had to come home.
In January of 1983, Kelly left school to deal with her cancer. During exploratory surgery, the doctors removed lymph nodes and moved her ovaries in case they needed to be irradiated. They also located a tumor underneath her sternum, which could not be removed. Following surgery, Kelly was booked for a protocol of 48 radiation treatments.
The radiation for me was, you know, it was weird. I rebelled. You know, they would tell me to do one thing and I would do the other. It was, you know, stay out of the sun, I'm out in the sun. You know, smoke marijuana so you're not throwing up, and I would be like, oh, no, I can't do that, you know. And just sort of a conflict case. It was a weird time because I didn't feel sick, and then I had all this radiation and the surgery, and on the last day they said, okay, you're better. And that's the day that I kind of went off the deep end.
Having left college once to treat her cancer, Kelly rebelled, but got through the procedure successfully. However, returning to school was even more difficult. She rebelled again, and this time hit the wall.
I went into what I call the dark years after they told me I was well. I already was having problems in school. I mean, I was barely 17 when I went off to college, and I didn't know how to cope. I was out of sync with my classmates, that I was going through all of these, you know, physics with calculus and the sequences. So now I was like kind of left behind, and, you know, I started to slide, and I was, you know, getting incompletes in classes and withdrawing, and my parents didn't know, and, you know, I had a little drug problem, and, you know, one day I nearly died from, you know, cocaine. I just felt like I was falling in space.
No longer fitting in, Kelly left school again and found herself attracted to the world of rock and roll, where she got a job as a promoter.
I was working at Def Leppard concerts and U2 concerts and, you know, Neil Young and Van Halen and ZZ Top and, you know, Michael Jackson. You know, I was on the Victory Tour in 1984. I was living this other life. You know, I was the one who had all the backstage passes to the sold-out shows. So I was the one that, you know, I drove a DeLorean in, you know, in college, and I was living a pretty jet-set life, and I liked it.
After 4 years of hard living in the music scene, Kelly had had enough. One day she walked away, realizing the need to pull her life together.
I got sober, I got cleaned up, and I went back to school, and my parents came back into my life, and they put me back in college, and now I went back to Florida International University in Miami. And now when I went back to school, I loved it.
Kelly's life was back on track, and her future looked bright, but not for long. Just before graduation, her father called, saying her mother was in the hospital. 2 weeks later, she passed away.
It was pretty tough, and my dad was a retired Army colonel. You know, he'd always wanted to go to Alaska. My mom and him had traveled a lot after I went off to school, and you know, a week later my dad paid, you know, cash for a motorhome. I graduated, and we got in the motorhome, and we drove from Florida to Alaska to see the Alcan Highway. And I was meditating every day and trying to get my serenity back. And I heard the voice, you know, say, you know, interview for a job, and I thought that meant I'll interview for a job and I'll practice, and when I get back to Miami, I'll get a job. I got offered a job at the NBC affiliate in Anchorage, and it was double the money I would make in Miami, and I said yes. And that, you know, a month later, I was living 5,000 miles away from where I grew up.
Finally, Kelly had her first real job working in television and loved it. She soon met a wonderful man, got married, and life seemed ideal. Shortly after, her husband, who worked for the state of Alaska, lost his job after the governor's election. The two decided to move to Los Angeles. Kelly was quickly offered a job at NBC television, all in a whirlwind. Her marriage soon suffered. They separated amicably. Kelly soon met Mark, a cool rock and roll drummer, and they fell in love.
I was going to acupuncture, you know, just to kind of balance me out with all the turbulence that was going on in my world. And, you know, the acupuncturist said to me, I think you need to see a doctor. And it turned out I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in my stomach.
I had gone up to Portland, Oregon to see some of my friends and see my brother's family in Seattle. And I got the call from Kelly. She said, I found out I had cancer again. I associated cancer with death. So I cut my trip short and immediately flew home. And I remember that plane ride I had so much anxiety.
I had only worked at NBC for a few months, and I didn't have health insurance. You know, a CAT scan here and a couple of tests here, and I quickly, you know, went through all the money I had.
And we didn't really know what to do. We didn't know what was next. And I just had no idea what this was going to be like. And I had no idea what I was in for.
We started reading books. We got every book we could on nutrition and health and macrobiotics and raw foods, and, you know, went through stacks of different treatments, and finally ended up going to see a guy in New York named Dr. Gonzalez.
Kelly flew to New York City to meet with Dr. Nick Gonzalez, an integrative doctor who radically changed her diet and her lifestyle with his nutrition protocol.
Dr. Gonzalez is really strict. He's got a very, very strict program, and even to be admitted to it, you have to jump a lot of hurdles. And one is you cannot do chemotherapy or radiation because his program won't work if you do it. So because he's working to rebuild your immune system, if you take things that destroy your immune system, you're automatically off his list. Once I got there, he does a blood test and a hair test, and he basically body types you. And he said to me, I'm a moderate carnivore. You need to eat red meat with the fat, no leafy green things, no citrus, no salad, no coffee, no sugar. And if you're going to have dairy, you need to eat whole butter, whole milk, whole cream. And frankly, you know, I was bulimic on and off for years, and I thought this was crazy. I thought, oh my God, of all the nutty things people are telling me about, he wants me to eat like hamburger for breakfast. I was like, whoa. And you have to take this huge protocol of pills. You're taking pills about 6 times a day. And you have to do coffee enemas. And I had to do fresh carrot juice every day. I started on the program, and within 1 month, I was no longer bulimic, and I could feel my tumor shrink. And every time I cheated, I could feel my tumor get bigger. And so basically, I could monitor my own health and well-being based upon how well I followed the program.
One of the most fascinating parts of our relationship, and the most challenging parts, and looking back, one of the more sensational parts of our relationship is the fact that I was traveling a lot. So here I was, a musician on the road with a girlfriend and then a wife with cancer. At this time, she was still doing the alternative therapy that required so much maintenance and required her, when she came on the road, she had to lug literally like a suitcase, a whole suitcase of supplements. And she had to do coffee enemas twice a day, and she was doing liver flushes. So, and she had to do, everything had to be perfectly timed. So I'd be on the road. I remember, particularly when I was out with Foreigner, we'd be on the road playing, and we'd be recording a record, and Kelly would have to be timing and looking at her watch and setting her alarm to take all these specific supplements at all the specific times. And then those coffee enemas, boy, that's sexy.
From 92 to 94, I just did it, and I did it until I got tired and I couldn't do it, and I got tired of fighting with my family, and I got tired of fighting with my boyfriend's mom, and, you know, they were, oh my God, she's gonna die already. Can you get the chemotherapy? You know, we got doctors. And meanwhile, my first husband has moved back to Alaska and got a job with the state of Alaska again, and now got health insurance and put me back on the policy. He would not give me a divorce until he got health insurance for me, which, again, I think he saved my life. But I didn't really have any money, and I didn't have the money to take all my supplements, and I started to kind of skid. And as I started to skid, now the cancer started to grow. And I went from having stage 3A Hodgkin's to stage 3B, and I started to become symptomatic.
2 years, Kelly had been able to manage her cancer through her rigorous diet and supplement regimen. But despite her earnest efforts, she grew increasingly weary, and her rock and roll lifestyle took its toll. Kelly's cancer began to take over her body.
I was starting to have night sweats, and I was starting to have, I was itchy, and I was exhausted. Now, I was anemic, and my blood wasn't reproducing, my bone marrow wasn't making red blood cells, and I couldn't breathe. I'm taking ozone baths, I'm living in an ozone body bag, I'm taking supplements. I'm tired. And it was all I could do to just get up. Every little thing was such a hard, big move for me.
A friend of Kelly's stopped by one day to visit and immediately saw how sick Kelly was. He carried her to the car and rushed her to the hospital.
I started having blood transfusions, and I felt better, you know. Oh, that's what was wrong. I needed some blood. I told them I had cancer and that I had been doing coffee enemas and carrot juice, and they were like, what, are you crazy? You out of your mind? You're gonna die. And I said, well, I haven't died in 2 years, and I didn't have insurance, and now I do, so maybe we can talk about what you think you should do. They made a treatment plan, and the plan was that I needed 7 months of this pretty serious chemo cocktail.
The protocol was excruciating. Kelly's regimen consisted of chemotherapy for 14 months. She went relentlessly every week without a break, sometimes every 2 weeks, sometimes every 3.
I was in my 2nd month of chemotherapy when I got married. And it was January 6th when I got married. It was January 13th when we bought a house. It was January 28th when we got 2 dogs, and, you know, by February 10th, I think Mark was going back on tour with Simple Minds, and so, you know, I didn't always have time to just think about my cancer, and in fact, I tried not to.
While she did the chemotherapy, she was always involved in some sort of alternative therapy to augment it, if nothing else to make her feel better, because chemotherapy is so taxing, and there's so many negative effects. She was always tired. She was always nauseous. And they gave her the Marinol pills, the marijuana pills, but those were too strong. So she ended up smoking pot, and she found just the right amount of pot to smoke at the right amount of times. She can control her nausea that way.
But the strict protocol was taking its toll on Kelly, both physically and emotionally. She had blood and platelet transfusions just to keep her cell counts at a healthy level for the unrelenting treatments.
She did that full course of chemotherapy, and then she was quote unquote in remission.
I went through a lot that year, and after 14 months of chemotherapy, you know, we really just tried to have as much fun and see as many things and do, you know, have a life. Because if you give up your life while you have cancer, you may not have a life.
After her cancer went into remission, Kelly and Mark spent the next few years living life to the fullest. But neither of them knew that this was the calm before the coming of a new storm.
March of 1996, it was my dad's 80th birthday. And I went home to Florida, and I felt this little pea on my neck. And everybody said, oh, it's nothing. You're nuts. You're hallucinating. I was like, you know, I want to believe him. So and this is at Cedars-Sinai, telling me I have nothing. I go to Florida, and my doctor, who originally diagnosed me in 1983, said, oh, it's nothing. I come back to LA, you know, trying to get my life back again. And by July, my dad is really sick, and I go home to Florida again. And this time, that same doctor in Florida biopsied that little pea that was now the size of an almond. And my dad dies, and like the same day, I think I get the diagnosis that I have cancer again.